Hello everybody, welcome to my first lesson on music theory. I'm going to have an online music theory course here basically, and we're going to start with chapter 1, which is basic musicianship. This is the very foundations of learning music theory. Basically, if you know nothing about music, this lesson is for you. If you know some of this stuff already, it might be a good idea to skip this video. We're going to talk today about the basics of music notation, basically, how to write music down. Alright, the first lesson is going to cover the staff, the treble clef, and then note names. We're going to get through all three of those in our first lesson. All right, so what we're going to do is take a look at what music looks like when it's written down. We're going to start with by labeling what we have on the screen here is this set of five lines, parallel, horizontal, evenly spaced. These lines comprise a staff. And what we're going to do with that staff is place little symbols on it that signify what we call notes. All right, and let me show you what that looks like. Just going to throw one out here. All right. We can place a note on this staff. The higher it is, the higher the pitch of the sound that that note represents. Every one of these little symbols, and I can have a whole bunch of them. I can have just a couple, whatever. I'll put 4 of them out here. There we go. So we can have 4 notes in different places on the staff, and each one of those 4 notes represents a sound. This is a sound, this is a sound, this is a sound, and this is a sound. Each one of the 4 represents a sound. The higher it is up on the staff, the higher the pitch of the sound it represents. The lower it is on the staff, the lower the pitch. All right? Now on a staff we have 9 different places that we can place a note. We can place a note on any of the 5 lines of the staff, and we can place a note in between those 5 lines. And there are 4 spaces where that can happen. Right? We can place a note here. Let's slide it over here for just a little bit and leave some room at the beginning for a little bit later. We can place a note here. We can place a note here. And I'm going to put one more up there on the top line. There we go. So the other thing we can do is we can put notes in between the lines, and that would give us 4 more places. So we're going to put note here, note here, here, and here. So we have 9 different places we can put notes. All right? Now, ideally, in order for us to communicate these notes and their corresponding pitches, high and low, to each other or to musicians or whatever, what we normally do is assign letters to each of these. Now we could just start here and say, okay, this is A, this is B, this is C, this is D. We could do that, but that's not generally how it's done. What we do is we have a little system where we pick one of the lines, and we could pick any one of them, so I'm just going to arbitrarily pick the top one. It's just the highest one up there, so I'm picking it. And what we do is we put some symbol on that line that represents a letter. So I'm going to invent my own little symbol here, and I'm going to make it, let's say a C. I'm just creating a symbol, so I'm going to make a little C. So it's going to be a dot with a C shape around it. So this is my invention. This isn't a real musical symbol. I just invented this. But this just kind of shows you what we can do. This fake symbol, and the term for it is a clef. This fake symbol here that I created, this clef, gives us information. What it says is we're going to start labeling with C right here. So if I were to label this note right here, it's on that line. So I would label it a C. Just like this, because the clef says here's where we're starting to label. And so if I went higher from there, I would go to D, E, F, G, and if I go lower from there, which is where all the other notes are, I would have to go backwards in the alphabet. I'd have to go to B and then A. So that one is going to be a B, like that, and then this one would be an A. Now the question becomes, what comes before A? Well, in our musical alphabet, which is down here, Our musical alphabet only has 7 letters in it. When you get to the end of one side or the other, it's like Pac-Man, you just come out the other side. So since we started at C, went to B, A, we go through the tunnel and come out over here, we're now at G. And we'd continue to F, E, D, C, B, and A. And the same is true for going the other way. If you were at F and then G and we're going this way, you would come out at A for the next one. So that means that this note would be labeled G. Right? And you would continue with F, E, D, C, B, A, etc. All right, so like I said, this is a fake clef. That thing that abomination that I just drew right here has no bearing on reality. There's no such thing as that clef. There is a C clef, but it's not shaped like that. That was one I just invented. So the type of clef that's most commonly used is called the treble clef. And I'm going to put that here. Now the treble clef, the one that I drew was based on the letter C. The treble clef, if you had to guess, maybe you could figure it out, is actually based on the letter G. And that's because there's sort of the G shape in the middle there. That's pretty rough looking G, but you get the idea. So this is the G clef, or the treble clef. Those are both acceptable names for that shape. It's more commonly referred to as the treble clef, but you can see that shape in the center, and then the origin of it is the letter G. Now, the 2 bits of information it gives us are the letter G and then where we're going to start labeling with G. And that spot is, the shape indicates this. It's kind of the center of the spiral, if you will. You can think of it kind of like crosshairs right there in the middle, right? It's kind of where it's pointing. So that means that we're going to start labeling on this line, which is where this note right here is, with G. So if we do that, here's G. Our next note would be A. We go through the tunnel and we come out the other side for A. Our next note would be B. Our next note would be C, D, E, and F. And then before that, we have a couple of letters to name also, and those should be pretty easy to figure out what they are. E and F, and those aren't aligned exactly right. There we go. All right, so using the treble clef's information that it's given us, so I'm going to get rid of that little red dot so we know what it actually looks like. Using the treble clef's information that it's given us, which is the letter G and the starting point, we've labeled all the notes on the staff. Now, imagine for just a second that that treble clef was not there. I'm going to drag it out of the way down. Okay, it's not there. There's no clef there at all. That means we don't know the names of these notes because we haven't been given a starting point. We can't name any notes until we have a starting point, which is the clef. So as soon as we see that clef there, now we know. We know to start G here, and we can go up and down from there. All right. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take, let's put another treble clef down here. And I'm going to take this guy. Let's see if I can do this. This guy. Yeah, it did a whole group of them, didn't it? Okay, that's all right. We'll go this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. And we're going to drag them down to this line. I'm going to get rid of the labels because they don't really apply anymore. Or they do. They're still accurate, but I've taken some of the notes out. So what I have now is I have just the notes that are on lines and just the notes that are on spaces. And what I'm going to do is start with the notes on spaces. I'm going to label them, and I'm going to show you that this one is F. Excuse me. F, and the second one is A, and this is just taken from that system we had earlier. This isn't anything new. These are the same letter names that those notes had when they were all together up there. And then the letter names for these are E, and then this one is G, this one is B, this one is D, and that one is F. So again, this is just what it was earlier. E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, and F. I've just taken almost half the notes out and put them on the bottom staff instead of in the middle of where they were. And separating them out, this gives us a little bit more of a memory key of how to remember what the note names are for the treble clef. Now, the treble clef is what you see most common. There are other clefs, but we don't see them nearly as often. So we're just going to pretend like, for now, all you'll ever see is the treble clef. Later on, you'll learn that that's not true, obviously. But for now, let's pretend like we only are dealing with the treble clef ever. All right, so down here, these are the notes that are in the spaces. So I'm going to say the space notes. And move that over here. These are the notes that are in the spaces. Up here, these are the notes that are on lines. All right, I'm going to get rid of, well, not like that, I'm not. I'm going to get rid of Mr. Clef here and Mr. Staff here. We know what those are. All right. So if you look, we have a really handy way to remember things down here on the bottom. For the notes that are in the spaces, the notes that are there, the letters spell out face. Now that's handy that it spells out a word, but it's doubly handy because it spells out a word that rhymes with space. So for the space notes, we remember face. Kind of handy, I think. There's no way to get that confused with line because it doesn't rhyme. Now, if we go up to the notes that are on lines, E, G, B, D, F does not spell any word that I know of. But we do have a handy way to remember that one. Right, and this probably works. We'll see if it does. What we do is we make a sentence, and of course it's going to foul everything up, but we'll just adjust. So we're good like that. Every good, and you've probably heard this before. If you haven't, well, it's time to hear it. Every good boy does fine. Now that's a sentence where E, G, B, D, and F, the note names of the 5 notes on the lines, spells the sentence. Every good boy does fine. And this is there are other sentences you can do, by the way. I've heard every good boy deserves fudge. I've heard silly ones like Elvis's guitar broke down Friday. Whatever you need to do to remember EGBDF, go ahead and do. And I basically choose this one to teach people because fine rhymes with line, which is consistent with face rhymes with space. So for the lines, every good boy does fine. For the spaces, face. And they sort of rhyme. So that's why I choose that one. Now, I once knew a person that decided that was a silly way to remember that, and he just told himself he was going to say EGBDF to himself 100 times and see if he remembered it that way, and he did. He just sat there and went EGBDF, 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 and I'm probably not in front of people, but that's what he said he did, and, you know, whatever. If that's more convenient for you to remember, that's fine. The main goal here, though, is so that whenever you see a note, you pick out, is that on a line or on a space, so you know which system to use to remember what the name of it is. And if it's on a line, count up from the bottom. Maybe it's this one, every good boy, or if it were this one, every good boy deserves fine. And if it was a space, count up from the bottom space, FAC or FACE, however you need to do it. So as an example, if we clear out everything except the treble clefs, like that, and we throw a note up there on the board, like right here, the process you would go through to tell me the name of that note, first of all, you have to make sure that you have a clef, and if it's the treble clef, then you use the system that we just learned. All right, so the system we just learned is, number 1, let's put the steps up here. Number 1, line or space, question mark. And I could probably slide that over and make that in one line, I hope. Yep, there we go. 1, line or space. Now the answer to that one on this one is it's a space. So you remember number 2. Number 2 for that would be, since it's a space, we use FACE. Now it's important from the bottom. It's important to do that from the bottom. Whoops, 2 asterisks. There we go. It's important to do that from the bottom because if you go FACE, you're going to get the wrong answer. So counting up from the bottom, FAC. So this note would be C. Now if it were a line note, using our system over here, line or space, it would be a face, or sorry, space. It would be a line, sorry about that. And so we would use every good boy does fine. And go up to the bottom. Every good boy, so this note would be a B. Alright, so summarizing really quickly, which sort of just did, but I want to review a couple of things just to make sure that you retain them. Number one is that this is a staff. We have the treble clef. We have what we're using today for the note symbols are just simple ovals. Now you'll learn later on that these ovals are actually called whole notes, but that's for a different lesson. These are just the simplest shape that we can draw to get the point across. And it's kind of the foundation building upon some other things. So anyway, we have these note shapes that can be in 9 different places on the staff. We have the system of naming the notes based on what the treble clef tells us. And then we had the system to remember all the note names from the treble clef staff based on whether it was on a line, we use every good boy does fine, or if it's in a space, we use face, F-A-C-E. Okay, that's all for this lesson. We'll see you next time, where we expand upon that by going higher than the staff, lower than the staff, and then we can start adding in some sharps and flats and looking at a piano keyboard and things like that in the future lessons. Okay guys, thanks for watching.